Yeah, one of the things that I love, you mentioned, alluded to this earlier, and one of the things that I love about your approach to all of this, in addition to the fact that it matches my own nerdy uh, preferences, but is the thing you said before about how singing with blend is actually each singer singing with their best resonance,
Yeah,
and because I think it is fair to say um, that in our profession, that is a minority opinion, and maybe not a consciously minority opinion, but it's one the typical practice, at least in American choirs, is to remove resonance from the sound to achieve blend,
yeah,
especially with younger singers, because
yeah,
this kind of goes back to the math problem that I mentioned earlier, where if you remove audible overtones from each individual singer's sound, then you've got less overtones that then could disagree with each other and
yeah.
sound out of tune. And so I don't. So again, most directors I don't think learn all this stuff in college, so they're not thinking, "Oh, better remove the first and the third overtone here from this vowel." They don't.
Right.
They don't think that. They just think, "Okay, well, if we go to more of a kind of sound
Hmm.
that is completely free of audible overtones, then I can get every singer to match that faster, and
Yeah,
the concert's next week." So
right.
this is what we do. So, in addition to that, first of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, what are some factors that maybe contribute to that I might be missing?
That's a great question, and it's a complicated one. So thinking about when I select E or oo in my vowel stream, oo is a choice that I would say works well if you are trying to deal with intonation, because oo does remove. So the second formant of oo is low, and so therefore there's not a lot of boost of overtones beyond the fundamental frequency on a new vowel, and that's why it's a good vowel to tune with. And just as you said, it removes a lot of the information going up above the fundamental pitch.
Hmm.
Um, I think in certain settings that can be helpful, because what you're also doing is training the collective listening of the singers. So if they can hear what it sounds like when it's in tune, and then you add a different vowel or more volume or more overtones, hopefully they can still tap into what that felt like, even though the sound has more dimension to it.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the trickiest parts of this conversation, and maybe it's something I shouldn't even say, has to do with vibrato. So one of the things I used to study is, do we resonate with and without vibrato? Does the singer's formant exist with and without vibrato? And it does.
Hmm.
A tenor can create the singer's formant just as you know uh, ferociously as they can with or without vibrato.
Yep.
So it, I think
Exhibit.
sometimes people,
I was going to say Exhibit A, the 16.
right, or the
Yep.
talus
Yep.
scholars,
Yep.
or the tenebrae,
Hmm.
or and I think that uh, sometimes people go to ooh and they reduce resonance, but really what they're hearing is a discrepancy of pitch, because the vibrato is, it's inconsistent in each voice. And usually when vibrato is a problem, it's because somebody's technique isn't totally lined up. And of course, for most of our students, that's the case.
Hmm.
But yeah, listen to Tenebrae or the Swedish Radio Choir or Telescholars or the 16, any of those groups. They sing with very little vibrato, and yet it's melt your face off resonant and beautiful and colorful. So there's really no reason. You don't have to reduce the overtones of a voice, I don't think, to blend. I think you just, there's some other things at play there.
Well, I think, yeah, but I think the only thing I'll quibble with is if you say there's no reason, I think there is a reason. I don't think it's a good reason, but I think the reason is it's easier. So
Yeah,
if you're working with younger singers, that's why some people call this or use the term choral Band-Aid vowels.
yeah,
Like if I can wrap every single vowel my choir sings in ooh,
yeah,
then I'm again eliminating the chances that they will sing out of tune. Um,
yeah,
and so, and in fact, and that's what a Band-Aid does. It doesn't cure the thing. It just it
right.
just covers it up. And so we do it. We do it because of expedience, and
Yeah,
oftentimes because, unfortunately, a lack of education in the science behind it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's an important distinction. And what I wonder, uh, you know, my personal feeling about it is, of course, that when I work with kids and adult singers, is that we're going to go for the I think you would agree with this, but just based on what you've said, with this overtone rich sound, and we're going to do the extra work that it takes to get it to all line up and be able to
Yeah.
listen for it. But at the same time, I think that the Band-Aid vowel thing, I'd also like to get your take on that too, because uh, through the use of the software, the Voce Vista software, it can actually show us like what vowel you're singing. And
Right.
and for a lot of directors I've seen, I can't even tell you how many conversations I've just had to sit on my hands on a Facebook group as people debated what a pure E vowel actually was anatomically.
Yeah.
And of course, the most common one that you'll see is that, wrap your lips around it like ooh and sing E.
Right.
And of course, that's an umlaut.
Right.
And it's not a pure E, and it's not an opinion. It's like you don't even have to be a singer. You just go to like a linguistic textbook too, and
Yeah.
you know. But again, it becomes like, are we doing this because we were taught by our choir teacher how to do it that way, or
Yeah.
are we doing it based on any kind of science? I know I don't. If you've ever listened to my show, we don't shy away from controversy, but. Um,
Yeah.
Is this something you see too? Because it's kind of one of my biggest pet peeves in the whole world.
Of saying it's an eval when it's really not, you mean? Or something
That
similar in that
not
vein?
yeah, just that kind of a fallacy. The idea
Gonna
that,
be
yeah.
yeah. I think it's actually I think it's a kind of a complex subject. So my
Mhm,
suggestion, for example, of training on E and oo is because those tend to be more successful, and maybe in some ways they are band-aidy. Um, I think also the age of the singer is a factor, and it's difficult to talk about any of this without talking about the larynx itself. And so, if you're dealing with children or children whose voices haven't quite developed yet, um, there are so many variables going on in someone's larynx that they may not be able to make a sound quite like what you're thinking without, for example, register.
mhm,
If we talk about register, middle school. I just did a middle school honor choir, and the kids, especially some of the young tenors whose voices have just changed, struggle with getting out of their chest register.
mhm,
So I might have them go toward ooh or something that will help them get through their break with ease. Um, and so to me, that maybe is different than a band-aid, but it's a way to navigate register shifts, developmental levels of voices, those kinds of things. I think the band-aid vowel situation, though, is very tricky because it can produce a sound that feels like the right sound because everybody's sound is you go to the least common denominator, right? The least
mhm.
colorful voice.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and that's pretty pleasing because it sounds blended and nobody's getting hurt and it feels safe and it's fine. But but I think that's when we get into trouble with our voice faculty colleagues because then singers come out of rehearsal and they're exhausted because they're not efficiently using their vocal folds and they're
Yep.
not using the full spectrum of color of their voice. So I do think it's challenging, but yeah, you're right. When people are like, "Well, I'm a week away from the concert, and I've got 20 random things going on in my classroom, and we're just going to live on ooh for a while um, to get there." There's some good to that because it does help train choirs to listen and to unify.
Mhm.
But the problem with it is you're never really getting their full timbre, their full color capability. And so it's never really going to be super exciting to listen to because there's not a lot of range to it.
Right. And I would only clarify one thing in my little rant, which was that I think you doing warm-ups on E and ooh, I wouldn't consider that Band-Aidy at all, unless it wasn't actually E and it wasn't actually ooh. So for example,
Ah, yes.
if you're doing